of Jazz. I am super excited because my husband is joining me today. And the reason why it is so important that he joins me today is because if you guys don't know, we just dropped an episode with the Notorious Moms podcast. And we were discussing how long is too long to wait for a ring. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's on our Mama's Cocktail Hour YouTube page. It was a super dope conversation. Four women, mature, all married, different perspectives. However, in that conversation, I brought up some things about the relationship between me and my husband before we were married. And so I thought, why not expand on that? And I can't expand on that if I don't have my other half here. So he graciously, with a little pushing for me, agreed to come on to Tuesday Talks and have this conversation. So, William, let's talk about this. First, let me ask you the question
Hmm.
from a male's perspective. How long do you think is too long to wait for a ring?
I mean, from a male's perspective or from my
From a
perspective? Because my
okay, from
perspective, remember, my mother and my father didn't get officially married for 13 years.
so give me your perspective.
I mean, my perspective, I don't think we're asking the question, how long is too long?
Hmm.
You do it when it feels right. So it could be, I mean, we've, there's people that have done it. They've done the little let's go to Vegas, and they've done it because they felt that it was right. And then you look at
Hmm.
my parents. My parents didn't. They were living together, two two kids, but they didn't officially get married until 13 years after my father decided to move his stuff into the house without my mother knowing. So I mean, literally, she came home from work and all his shit was in the house. But it took them 13 years. But
Hmm.
from my perspective, I don't think it's the length of time. I think it's just you do it when it feels right. And for our situation, I mean, let me not jump too far because I'm sure that's going to come up in conversation. But
Hmm.
I don't think a length. I don't think it's a right mind frame to put a specific time frame on. It could be a week, a month, a year, like my parents, 13 years. I
Hmm.
just think you do it when it feels right.
So,
When somebody up there tells you when the time is right, and then you just do
so going back to your parents, I know you were younger, but is it something that both of them agreed on that you were aware of that they didn't care to get married? Is it that your mom wanted to get married and your dad didn't? Or is it that they were just content just doing what they were doing and living as a family and then just decided one day, like, can you recall if there was?
I mean, I remember the time frame, but I wasn't present for any conversation, so I don't know what their conversations were about that topic. I just know that one day we all went to Lita's house, and
Hmm.
my father's cousin, who is a pastor, was there, and his parents were there, and they did it in Lita's house, and it was 13 years after they got together. But the entire time frame, they were living together, they had kids, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I don't know if their thought process was we were already living that way, so it wasn't something that was a topic of conversation until it became a topic of conversation, and then they said,
Hmm.
"Screw it, let's do it." Or if they had backdoor conversations and we were too young to hear the conversations, so they were having conversations in the bedroom while we were asleep. I don't know. I just
Hmm.
know in their situation they didn't do it for 13 years, and then one day we all got dressed, went to Lita's house, and they were officially married in Lita's house. So
And
I
to
don't
you, it
know.
didn't change anything in the dynamic. It was just like business as usual, right?
It was, yeah. I mean, it was official, but for all the years prior to that, the situation was already that we were already living like that. He was there. My mother was there. For all intents and purposes, the dynamic was already that. this, I guess, was just the step that they took to make it
Official.
official, sign the papers, I guess. But there was nothing that I can remember that anything changed after. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they were living as a married couple for 13 years before they had been.
It's so interesting because for me, my mom and dad, they were together for 20 years. They never were married, and they lived like they were married. They called each other husband and wife, but they never, like, it was never a thing. I don't even think it was even discussed, like, oh, we should officially get married. I don't know if it's because, well, now maybe looking back, I see it could be my mom was hesitant because of all his issues with the substance abuse and the alcoholism, but everyone referred to them as husband and wife, and they referred to each other as husband and wife, and it was just never a thing. My mom had a husband and kids.
Yeah,
So marriage,
and I know for sorry not to cut you off, but I know for my parents it was the same dynamic. You know, they for all intents and purposes they were married,
hmm
and then it just, like I said, it just one day everybody was at each other's house and it was done. But it was never looked at any time before that as any different way
different. Yeah, and it's
by
so
anybody.
interesting.
So
It's the same thing, babe. Like with even like when I think about it now, actually, nobody like that I can recall, like with my aunts and stuff, because we were really close to my mom's side, not really my father's side. None of them were legally married. They all
mm,
kind of coinhabited and they were like together, but we just referred to them as husband and wife. The only one who got married was my titi Marilyn, and that's because her husband also was a Marine, and she got married so she can go with him down to the base down south.
makes sense,
Um,
and
they,
they get more money too.
well, they're still married to this day, but I remember that was pretty much it. They were getting married because she wanted to go live with him down south. But everyone else just lived together. But everybody saw them as husband and wife. So it was weird because growing up, like I saw weddings on TV, and as a little girl, and we saw la novelas. So like Spanish soap operas for you guys who don't know. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get married. I want to get married because I'm gonna be my Prince Charming. But then again, my reality, nobody around me was married, but they were living like they were married. So even from an early age, I had a really like confusing view of who gets married, who doesn't get married, and what marriage looks like. It was really interesting. So I wanted to ask you that question so we can kind of get your perspective going into as we continue to talk the topic.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know. I don't know if it's just my thought process is different when it comes to it, but I don't think there's to ask what the duration of time is that is
Mhm.
correct. I think it's all in perspective for that particular couple. You know, so I mean, I don't think that somebody who gets married in a week is wrong. I don't think somebody that gets married in 13 years is wrong because the couple that gets married in a week can last 50 something years. The couple that gets
Yeah,
married, look at my parents. It took them
yeah,
13 years to get married, and then they ended up in divorce. You know, so I think it's relative, and it just depends on the couple. I don't think saying a year is too long, 2 years is too long.
hmm
I don't I don't think that a time frame is the right thing to put on. You know, it's just you
I
do it when it feels
agree.
right.
I agree because I think when I was younger, I think I probably would have been like a year or two. But now that I'm older and I'm a married woman myself and I'm a little bit more secure and mature, I would say that I agree with you. I think that it's just the feeling if it's right, if two people
You're
are on
married?
board.
I
I
didn't know that.
am. I'm married.
I didn't know that.
But like now that I understand the ins and like more of the ins and outs, because we're still fairly new in the marriage game. We just made 5 years a couple of weeks ago, and we've been together almost 10. But it's just different now when you're in it as opposed to when you're not. So again, you have to have two people who really are on the same page because it's not all. Rainbows and sunshines, the whole marriage game. So, babe, you say that is when two people are like when you feel that the time is right. So, my husband was previously married before, right? So, your first marriage, would you say that you got married because you were in love? You got married, and guys, don't worry, don't. We're very honest with this, so don't be freaking out for me, waiting for him to answer those
I
questions.
mean,
Like,
it's not a topic of
yeah,
conversation we haven't discussed privately. So
yeah.
yeah.
So, what was your first time? So, how old were you the first time you got married?
Oh wow. Uh,
You ain't that
20.
old, William.
I had 20, 20 no, like in my late 20s. I don't
Mhm.
remember the exact. I know I was already back from my second enlistment, so 2028 maybe something like that.
Mhm. Okay.
Mm.
And would you say that
That
you
tells you. See. The fact that I forgot some of that shit tells you something. It should tell you something.
what should
Hmm.
it tell us, William?
Yeah, that's. I'm trying to. All I. It's not. It was a time of my life that I learned a lot. Let's put it that
Mhm.
way.
So when you got married at 28, would you say you know how you just explained like it's the timing and you just feel that is right? Is it something that you felt that you wanted to do? Was it because you were like what was the circumstances in you getting married? Was it because you were in love, like
I mean, I thought I was, but
mhm,
now being a more mature adult,
seasoned?
I think I think that I don't think I was in love. I think I was in lust. There's a difference, and I think I just mistook those feelings for the other.
Well, tell us what's the difference from a male's perspective? Because women, we talk about that all the time. The difference between being in love and being in lust. So,
I
what is
mean,
your
it's just how do I phrase this?
honestly? Because that's what we do here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I in conversations I have all the time, I always say when I'm talking to other guys that I work with, stuff like that, I always say, I could be blunt and be straight up, but I say a pretty face and a fat ass always messes up a guy's head.
Mhm.
And I look back now to all the things that happened during that relationship, and I don't think that, yeah, like it just revisiting some of it and some of the talks that
Mhm.
we've had, it just makes me understand more that that was not a love situation. That was more, even though I was in my late 20s, it was more like the high school chick situation where it's like, you know what I'm saying? And it was one of those things. So, um, there was a lot of mistakes made on both parts.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of those mistakes that were made were because of that situation, because it wasn't, we weren't, we thought we were in love with each other. And we thought that the things that we were going through and things that we dealt with, and we thought that it was the right thing to be going through.
Mhm.
But now looking back, I should have been out of that relationship towards the end of year one instead of year 10. But the pretty face and the fat ass makes you, and then this is something that in my mature age now, I have conversations with guys, and I say, I'm like, it blinds you. It blinds you. Like you forget sometimes that you're angry. You forget sometimes that the person did something wrong, and it goes both ways. Because guys can be manipulative like that too. But it wasn't the ideal situation, and even though we tried to make ourselves think that it was,
Mhm.
and we kept trying to make it work, trying to fix it, but the end result wasn't what a stable, ideal, what I guess what somebody would call an ideal marriage was. It was arguing and sex. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. You say a pretty face and a fat ass from male's perspective could really mess with your just your mind, the way you think. For women, we get digmatized. It's kind of like the same thing. Like
Hmm.
again, it becomes like you confuse, especially if you're in a relationship. Like for example, again, we're always honest with each other. The relationship with my son's father. So Chris is my husband, and he is the father of my two children. But my son is biologically not his. So I had my son from a previous relationship. For all intents purposes, though, Chris is dad to both of my kids.
Well,
But
that's like I told him to his face. There's a difference between being a father and being a dad.
right,
He's CJ's father, but I'm CJ's dad. There's a big difference.
there's a big difference. You're absolutely right. And but long story short, again, the same type of situation. We thought we were in love. I thought I was in love. He was very manipulative. He was constantly cheating on me, and I just thought that that's what the way it was supposed to go. I dealt with it because I thought at the end of the day, the end result would be that I would become officially his wife. And that's what you do when you have a family, you write it out. I was also young, I was also super insecure, and I was just kind of dealing with whatever it was that he was dishing out. And you know what happens when you keep accepting bad behavior? They're going to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and doing more and more and more, because why should they even rein themselves in? You keep taking it. And so he constantly cheated on me. He wasn't there for my son and myself. But there was a when you're young, what do? You break up and you make up, and there's a lot of sex, and that confuses you because you confuse sex with love, when in reality, sex is a very big part of when showing love, but it can't be the whole relationship. You know, there's more to that, and I know for myself when I was young, I was confusing the two, and so back and forth for 13 years in this chaotic situation. Um, Again, cheating on me left and right, had a whole other life pretty much, and finally, I decided that I was gonna end that situation. And I was gonna rock out into the sunset with me and my son, and I was gonna do whatever it is that I needed to do to finally be free and just live my life with me and my son. And then I meet this guy, um, and that brings us to the beginning of our relationship. So, for all you guys who don't know, my husband and I didn't meet in a bar. We didn't meet in a train or because we worked together or we crossed paths somewhere. We actually met on Match.com.
Go ahead, do the plug, do the plug, do the plug.
See if they give us some money, right? So we actually met on Match.com, which was pretty interesting. I know I was on Match.com. He was actually the first person that reached out to me. I decided like I want to date, but like I said, I was a single mother. I didn't know where I was supposed to go to do that. And something was like, yo, you should just join this website. And so I did. And that's how I met Chris. Um, and right off the bat, I knew that he was different. First of all, he's older than me by a few years, 5. And but just the way he approached me, the way he spoke to me, the way we spent time together, and the conversations that we had, even from the very first time, because we spoke a lot on the phone for a couple of weeks before we physically met. And then when we did meet the first time, we spoke for hours. And I already knew from that moment it was different. Um, I felt very connected to him, very comfortable, and we had a lot of things in common. So I knew there was something different there. Your turn, babe. How
I
would you take
mean,
that?
uh, I I I was single for 3 years. That 3 years of my life was pretty much all work and no play. Um, like like keep it honest. Like I had a bedroom set in my house. That's it because that's all
Yeah.
I did. I went home from work, went to sleep, woke up in the morning, went back to work. Um, and
Why were you on Match?
it was fuck it, why not type of thing because I wasn't gonna. I have being in the military. I did the bars and all, and it was out of
Mhm.
my system. That was never really my thing, so to speak. And I dabbled in it when we would travel to other countries just for the sake of saying I had a drink in Spain, I had a drink in Italy. But I was never big on the bar scene. I was never big on going out to these types of places. So it was kind of difficult for me. And
Were you
I
shy?
always tended to be the shy person. I was always the quiet one in the group. I was always the one that was watching everybody else to make sure everybody else was okay. And it would be situations where people would ask my friends, "Why your man don't talk? Why your boy don't talk?" And I mean, I'm still like that. You tell me all the time. I'm very introverted.
Mhm.
So I was sitting on the bed. I think I had a Giants game on, and I had my little
The little Mac.
$200 old school Acer laptop on my lap. And as a matter of fact, that's the laptop I gave CJ.
Yes.
Remember that blue laptop?
Mhm.
And I
You
just said,
showed
why
to
not?
me.
Yeah, I just said, why not? And one thing led to another, and here we are.
Yeah, it
But
was.
I'll
It
never
was
forget that conversation in front of the house, though, by the bricks in front of the apartment building.
the
The
first
first
night
the
we met.
first time we ever talked when we were standing there by the bricks. I remember that
What was so memorable to you from that conversation?
because I look at it now and I'm like, why didn't I just go back?
Stupid. You so stupid.
Um,
You
None.
so
I
stupid.
thought because it was totally different from what somebody would expect. Some a male and a female's first, what do you want to call it, link up, hook up, get together, whatever. All we did was talk. All we did was sit there and talk. We went to the store and then came back and sat there and talked. And to me, that was very telling, because there tends to be expectations on what the first date is, the first
Mhm.
get together is, stuff like that. And the fact that we were both able to just sit there in front of my apartment and just talk says a lot.
It actually did because from me, I was like, I didn't, just like you, I had a very tumultuous past relationship. So it wasn't a lot of connecting and just like chilling and just, oh, it was like friends. Like we were building a friendship. And so to me, I was like, wow, because when I met you, I was almost 30. So I was more mature now. And it was just a vibe. I didn't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
it was a vibe and it was just so natural and I was super excited because I was like, wow, I really like this guy because it's just different and it felt very comfortable but exciting at the same time. And we continued to see each other and it was very interesting because I remember I had my son and he worked a lot and so it was very hard for us to see each other um possibly the way that we wanted to, but in a way it was actually good because we spent a lot of time having to talk and communicate, so we got to know each other a lot um very quickly, I guess. Not everything about each other, but we learned how to communicate and learn how, what do you think, babe? We learned how to just
I mean,
talk.
I put it in terms of how I explain my job to people sometimes, and what I tell them is important at work. For me, it's relationships before tasks. So I put it in the same perspective. Um, it's you got to build a relationship first before it becomes the boyfriend, girlfriend, husband and wife, boss, subordinate, whatever,
Mhm.
whatever part of life you want to put it into. but I think we allowed ourselves to do that, because but the underlying factors played a big deal. Like
Mhm.
you had your walls up, I had my walls up. CJ was involved. There was a hesitation for me to meet CJ, but I
Mhm.
think that benefited us in the long run because it caused us to communicate more in the beginning than to just jump into something. Um, so I think that it helped us build a stronger foundation, I guess, if you
Mhm.
want to call it. You know what I mean? And we got to know a lot more about each other before anything next level happened.
So speaking of next level, things happen very quickly for us.
Right.
Um, and we'll get to that in another conversation because that itself will be a whole other episode. But I agree. We had a lot of things that kind of forced us to slow down because honestly, we were feeling each other so much. It would have just been natural for us to just be together all the time, hanging out, having sex. Like it would have just been a lot very quickly. I think it would have happened that way. Had we not had certain things that just stopped us.
And I
And
also
it
think that it might have changed our perspective of each other if we would have took it to that level that much faster. You know what I mean?
how
So I
so?
think, huh?
How so?
I mean, we might have looked at each other differently. Let's be honest. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We wouldn't have if that next level would have happened that much
Mhm.
sooner. We might not have gotten to know each other on a mentally more intimate level. So not having that mental intimacy, but having the physical intimacy could have stifled the growth of the mental intimacy.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't always happen. It works out
Mhm.
different ways for different people, but it's always a possibility there. So because we allowed ourselves to communicate so much in the beginning and get to know each other so much in the beginning, that mental intimacy just heightened the physical intimacy instead of skipping over the mental intimacy and going straight into physical intimacy and then trying to build the mental intimacy. It's that's how we usually do it. And as I aged and got older, I realized that I think that's backwards. I think you need to get to know each other first,
Mhm.
because if certain things happen off the jump, off the rip, then you start to look at each other like,
And I think because we came from those type of relationships where we admit all the time that we confused love with lust and there was a lot of that sexual connection, and I think that when we met each other and we had the complete opposite connection first, I think that was very appealing to us. I think that was
yeah.
very like we couldn't get enough of that.
So
And
I
because
think in our situation, it was the total opposite of our past relationships. So
complete
that's what,
opposite.
yeah.
And you would think, well, what about the sexual chemistry? I know for myself, it made me more attracted to him physically because emotionally, I was getting so much from the situation that
Right.
it was stimulating me emotionally and making me feel things in a different type of way than before. So to me, I was becoming more and more attracted physically because of what was going on emotionally. Because, like you said, it was the opposite in the other relationship that we had. And this was kind of a new thing. And I honestly think that's one of the reasons why we fell in love because we got to know each other. We got to have a conversation. We became friends and we started to get to know each other in a different type of way. And I don't think neither one of us had experienced that as an adult up to the point when we met each other. Things happened very quickly for us. Things did get very serious with us very quickly, and it wasn't long before our daughter came into our lives, and she is one of my biggest blessings. She's literally, I say always, our love personified. Like you take the best of me, the best of Chris, and some extra sauce, and you get Miss Haley. Um, literally our heart in human form. It was still difficult, would you say, babe? Because now it's like we now have two kids. And when the situation, I know for me, I was like, great, I'm having a baby with a man who I love, and I felt more secure with you. But at the same time, when we had Haley, I got scared and I felt like, okay, being that I was a single mom before, those fears of, oh my God, could this happen again? And now I have two kids. Um, will I somehow be in the same situation? Started to creep up. Did you start to have any insecurities that were brought up by your past relationship once we went on to that other part of our relationship by bringing Haley into this world?
I don't think I don't think the insecurities from having a child came from the past relationship. I think my insecurities initially was I went from being single and living alone to all of a sudden being a family of four, like that, and then having the opposite ends of the spectrum, a baby, and CJ who was about to be a teenager.
Hmm.
So that's where I was like, holy shit, because like I said, for 3 years I was single, living on my own, working, no responsibilities other than myself, and then and literally like that everything changed. So I think that's where my fear came into to play, because remember when in some of our beginning conversations I used to tell you that I wasn't trying to get with a female who had a child,
Yes.
and
Oh, I forgot to tell you that. He he said that he would never date a woman with a child. I had a
now
whole kid.
right, but now let's touch on that real quick. It wasn't because I
Hmm.
think that there's anything wrong with that. Don't. It's just because from my standpoint I felt like I would always have to be dealing with another guy who knew you just as intimately as I did.
Hmm.
And I guess I don't my bravado, machismo, whatever you want to call it,
Your
wasn't
ego.
my ego wasn't feeling that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it just made me a little uncomfortable. But another thing that another aspect of my thought process that has changed since meeting you. You know what I mean? Um, but I don't think I don't know. I don't think that any insecurities came because I didn't have any children with my ex.
Mhm.
So I don't think any insecurities came from that. In fact, I think that, and we've had these conversations before, that Haley coming from you is because that's what was meant to happen.
Of course.
Because as we've discussed, my
Mhm.
ex had been pregnant 3 times, and all 3 times lost a baby. So that just later on in life made me think about it and made me realize that she wasn't meant to be the mother of my child. You were. So in the beginning, of course, I was nervous. It's my first kid, but I'm not walking into one kid. I'm walking into two. And I am a man who was raised by somebody who's not my father. So I know the difficulties behind that. I know the issues behind that. I know the struggles that me and my father had.
Mhm.
So I was nervous about having the same struggles with him. Um, which thank God none of that really has come to fruition. Um, but I don't think I don't think I was nervous about having the child because of my ex. I think I was just nervous about having a child because I was just nervous about having a child. And it wasn't just the child. It was the child. It was you, and it was CJ. So it took me a second. I had to take a step back, and I had to really grasp what was happening because it just
It's a lot.
yeah, it was like I said, 1 minute I'm waking up by myself, next minute I'm a family of four, like that. And it was like, oh my God, what's going on? And it took a minute for me to wrap my head around. So I think
It's
that's
so
where my nervousness was coming from.
it's so funny because we were actually not planning on, so we didn't live together throughout my whole entire pregnancy. And the plan actually was we still weren't even going to live together when Haley was born, because we were working towards that. We wanted to. We just still had some logistics that we needed to work out. But it's so funny because um the day we brought him home, you looked at me and was like, so is it okay if I move in? If I just
Well, I spoke to mom about that first, and she was like, "Duh." You know what I mean? I thought she was gonna give me some pushback, but she was like, "No, of course. What are you, stupid? That's what you should be doing." So I I I mean, from the way I was raised, it's like, how am I gonna live in another apartment while you're raising my daughter? Like we weren't. It wasn't a bad relationship. We were
Mhm.
together. We were in love. There was no issues. It wasn't like it was a one night stand and Haley came. So how do I look living? How do we look living in two separate locations
Mhm.
and you bearing the brunt of raising my child? That just didn't. It's not going to work for me. It's like I have to be there. I have to be present. I have to help. I have to assist. That's the way my mother raised me.
I
So
think though when you saw her come home though, like when you actually saw her home,
no, that
it
played
dawned
that
on
played a
you
part. Yeah, yeah.
because
I'm not even gonna front. Hmm.
it was literally like
Hmm.
I believe the day that we got home, and then like the next day you told me that you were gonna call your landlord or whatever. So it was
Hmm.
again that was something else that showed me that wow, he's totally in it. Like, and the reason I bring these things up is because I want you guys to understand that Chris from the very beginning didn't do anything to give me the indication that he wasn't in it. Like, of course, he had his issues, I had my issues, but overall, like he was in it. And it goes to show that though that when you have baggage, it doesn't matter what's happening in front of you. You still gonna carry that and kind of like internalize that and be fearful. I remember one time I was trying to explain to you, and I don't know if you remember this, why I was so fearful of you hurting me or you cheating on me. And you had told me that that's not fair to you because you haven't done anything, and I should just automatically just give you the benefit of the doubt because you hadn't done anything to me. And I had tried to explain to you that for almost 13 years, my reality was someone who was constantly cheating on me or doing things to hurt me. So to me, my reality up to that point was not trusting, always. And it's not fair to you, but that's just the way that reality's perception, and that's how I was just perceiving it. And unfortunately, you got the brunt of that because I was damaged, you know. And I bring this up to say back to the point of our conversation was that we rocked it out. We figured it out. We had good days, we had bad days, but the more we went about our regular day and we got closer and more entwined as a family, I was freaking out because I was like, all right, well, why isn't he asking me to marry him? Why are we not getting married? And that to me was a real sensitive spot because in my previous relationship, it never happened. So I was like, well, I'm good enough to have babies with, but I'm not good enough to be a wife. And when we first started talking about marriage, you flat out told me you didn't want to get married again. And that really drove me insane.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I was there. Remember?
um, because I really internalized that. So I guess my question to you is why did you feel up to that point that you, even though you had gotten acclimated to being a family of four, like you said, we were in love, we were, raising our family. Why is it to that point that you still felt like you didn't want to be married again?
I think I think a lot of that fear came from the way my marriage ended, where I ended up. We were in. I guess now looking back at it, we had similar feelings. You for pressuring and me for not wanting to at that time were stemming from similar places. Your issues with your ex, my issues with my ex. You were not trustworthy of me fully because of that situation and because of all the things that happened, and that's why you were feeling the way you felt.
Mm.
I was feeling the way I felt because I walked out of that marriage with two garbage bags full of shit and nothing else. That and the garbage bags were sitting in a room waiting for me in an apartment that I busted my ass to get. Everything in that apartment was mine. That I not mine, but I bought. We had the dog, a little dog, and I walked out of that apartment with two garbage bags full of shit. And that very weekend, the next dude was already in my house.
Mm.
So it made me scared a little bit to have to want to go through, not to want to go through that again, because I had to start from scratch. Like literally, I had to live in Lita's house because it was so abrupt. Literally from 1 month, August, September, October, I was out of the house. That's how quick everything changed. But then,
So from your okay, so how did you rationalize that then? Like you said you didn't want it to end the same way, but you were like you said you were in the same boat like me because we weren't in the same situation, but you were foreseeing the same end result.
right, right, right. So what do you mean? How did I rationalize it? Like
How,
to
so
for us to
then
get to where we are now?
no, no, how did you rationalize that the same thing would happen though? Because the situation was different. You get what I'm saying?
I didn't rationalize that the same thing would happen. I just for remember again, I was single for 3 years, so that whole time frame I was like, fuck that shit, I'm not doing it again. So my mind frame was already there before I ever met you.
Mhm.
So I was struggling with that mind frame and transitioning to the mind frame that I was beginning to transition to after having met you. So I don't know how to phrase it the correct way, but he was sitting here, he was sitting here, and they were fighting with each other because it was like, all right, you want it, but you don't want to do this shit again. You want it, but you don't want to do this shit again. You really don't want to do this shit again, right? So why are you gonna do this? That's what it was. So it was a tough situation to be in. You know what I mean? I'm a 30-something-year-old man. I got to go live with my grandmother because I literally got kicked out of my house. The locks were changed. I mean, it was as grimy as cutting the cable off, so I couldn't watch the Yankees in the World Series that year. She
It's
everything.
crazy that you say that because it goes to show, and that's why I'm asking you these questions because I want people to see that men go through
Mhm.
very similar situation and
Mhm.
heartaches and heartbreaks and fucked
Mhm.
up ending to relationships just like women. We tend to think that men are like emotionally inferior and that they don't have feelings and that they can't possibly go through what we go through when we have a really bad breakup. But when I heard your story and when you explained to me what happened, that's how I knew I was in love. Because when you finally, after a couple of months, told me exactly what happened to you, my first thought was I wanted to take care of you and I had promised myself that I would never do that to you. And that's how I knew that I was in love with you. So that's why I'm asking you these questions because I think people do need to be reminded that men get their feelings hurt and their heart broken as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's no matter how strong a man acts, sometimes that's all it is an act. And and I'm sure you felt the same way. You've expressed to me that you felt the
Mhm.
same way, but it took a long time for me to realize that it wasn't me. Yes, there was some things that I did wrong. Yes, there was some things that I could correct.
Mhm.
There was behaviors that I could have corrected. Yes, could I have gone out this one time? Maybe, things like that. But it took a minute for me to stop looking at myself in the mirror and asking myself what I did wrong. And there was just one day where I realized that it wasn't me. All of that stuff was happening because there was already another situation going on outside of the mix that I wasn't aware about until after. And the pressure was put on for me to go so that this one can come,
It's
you
so
know, and
crazy because again, it's just like you said, like women we do. When we get cheated on, we think the same thing. What did we do wrong? What could have we changed? Maybe we would have done this differently. Maybe if we would have looked like this. We confuse love and lust, and we confuse drama. Sometimes we confuse drama with excitement.
yeah,
Because what I realize is that in a lot of relationships that are like unhealthy or toxic, there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows. So it's like sometimes people can get addicted to that
yeah,
because when that happens, the feelings are always intense. And sometimes people need that because when it's good, the feelings are so intense, like you get intoxicated by it, and like it's like validation. You know what I'm saying? And
hmm,
then when it's bad, it's like you're working almost like a game to get that feeling back. It's
yeah, yeah.
really, really, it's really, really, really weird. But you and I wrestled back and forth with marriage. Let me tell you guys, yes, I pressured,
For
I
two
fought,
years,
fought, I
two
did
years.
because again, and now looking back, he knows we've had these conversations because
Yeah, there's nothing on here that we don't talk about that we haven't
yeah,
discussed before. So.
I was like, I didn't understand. If you love me, why can't we get married? If you love me, if you say you want to be with me forever and we're going to be a family, I couldn't understand. And that was really honestly, I was being kind of selfish also because I wasn't taking into consideration that he had just gotten out of a bad marriage. He was hit with an instant family. He had feelings he was dealing with. I was just so caught up in my own emotions, my own insecurities. I was only thinking about me. And in reality, I wasn't ready to get married. Like I told you in the beginning of this, I never really had a blueprint of what a marriage was. Nobody around me was married, but I just thought that if we got married, that somehow would validate not even our relationship, validate me. It was gonna somehow make right the wrongs of how I felt just being a baby mama from before. It had nothing really to do with our relationship. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to get married because I loved you, but I wanted to get married for the wrong reasons at that point, you know? Why are you
I
looking at me
know,
like that?
because I told you when we talked about doing this, and it's taken her, guys, it's taken her 8 years. Well, let's say six, because because
Mhm.
we were together for the first. It's taken her 6 years to admit what she just admitted right now.
But he's also admitted as well that he had his own issues. That
Yes, yes,
because that
yes.
wasn't something that he admitted
Hmm.
easily either before. So that brings us to saying, guys, I brought up going to counseling. Chris did not want to go to counseling. He did not want to go at all, let alone go to counseling to the pastor. You remember that? You didn't want to go to counseling. You didn't believe
Yeah,
in
because
counseling.
I didn't believe in it, and I didn't know the pastor that well at that time. So
But
that wasn't the way. You know my father. That wasn't the way that we were raised. We don't do shit like that. So it took a second for me to again to wrap my head around it and realize that it was the right thing to do for us.
and he said he did it because he loved me and he knew that that's what I wanted. And we went.
Hmm.
And something that was supposed to be short term turned into a 2 year process. And let me tell you something, guys. I know counseling is not for everybody, but if you are thinking or on the fence about it, I really would suggest it if both couples are open to it. Forget even being married. I really firmly believe that Chris and I may have not even been together had we not gone through it, not because we didn't love each other, because again, being in love and loving each other was never the question. It
Hmm.
was never the question between he and I. But we were in our 30s. We both had a life before us that caused us to go through a lot of things, and we had a lot of baggage. And we had to deal with that individually, and we had to deal with that together. And there was some days, right, babe? We go into those counseling sessions, and it's like it was great. We were gonna
There
make
was
it
there
work.
was one day we came out more in love with each other. The next time we came out, and I'm running down the block because she's throwing bricks at me. That's how serious it was. So I mean, it's like, but I think that we needed that intermediary because it helped us understand each other's perspective and where each other was coming from with the whatever you want to call it, the pressures, the hesitations, we needed somebody to open our eyes to what the other person was going through, and that's what the pastor did for us over the course of those 2 years. It took 2 years, but we finally got to that point.
It was
Mm.
one of the things that I know that it helped for us is that we were two people who were extremely guarded, and we were scared to really 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 open up. And I think people don't seem to understand that there's a difference between being open and really being vulnerable with your partner.
Hmm.
And that vulnerability is scary as shit, because we grew up, you tough, you don't really like want anybody to think you're sweating them, or like you can't live without them, or, and like I said, I had single parent syndrome, so it was like me against the world. I'll figure that shit out. I don't need you. But in reality, I did need him. And in reality, he needed to hear that I needed him, but I was scared. And that's something that, again, it took us a really long time to get to that place. A really long time. What's one of the things you think, babe, that you feel was the best thing, like one of the things that we learned or you learned to help us in our relationship from that counseling?
I needed to understand your perspective. I needed to understand where you were coming from. I needed to understand, for lack of a better explanation, what your mental state was. Because for me, it was hard. I didn't understand where some of this aggression was coming from. I didn't understand where like I don't like to call it pressure. I know you admitted to it, saying that you pressured me, but I don't like to call it that. But I needed to understand where it was coming from. And the the lack of communication that we had at that point was making it harder for us
Hmm.
to understand where the other person was coming from, because all we were doing at that point in time was just yelling at each other, talking over each other. And that's why I say it was important to have the pastor as the intermediary to help us understand, because we were able to finally say, okay, now I understand why she does that. Now I understand why he does this. So we can meet somewhere in the middle,
Hmm.
for, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we did. And I mean, currently we're still working on some of that stuff, but it stopped it from being a constant war
Yes.
to being a sporadic battle here and there, which every relationship has a sporadic battle. You know, that's another thing that in conversations that I have with people, I said there's no such thing as a perfect relationship. If
Hmm.
you tell me that you don't fight with your significant other, you're full of shit.
And somebody
And if you
cheating and
if you don't, that's because one of y'all in that relationship don't give a fuck.
hmm.
So I don't think that that's healthy. Not you gotta fight every once in a while. You gotta argue every once in a while. There's gonna be disagreements. What's healthy, what we learned as being what's healthy, is not avoiding the fight, but having the
Hmm.
fight and figuring out how to correct the issue.
Yep.
And that's what we needed the pastor for. And the pastor was able to flip that light switch on for us to figure out, all right, this is what you're struggling with. This is what you're struggling with. So how do we meet in the middle to fix this shit?
Hmm.
And that's what we needed to understand, because instead of us going like this and meeting in the middle, we were going like this. And it wasn't allowing us to do that. So the pastor was able to allow us to do that. And that was the biggest takeaway for me. Just knowing where you were coming from and understanding why you felt the way you felt, so that I was no longer angry about what you were doing, because I understood why you were doing it. And now we can talk about it. Now we can figure it out as a unit, instead of me sleeping on the couch and you sleeping in the room.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. I agree. I think the understanding, because once we started to really pay attention to what no, once we started listening to what the other person was saying, and we were getting a better understanding, we were starting to build trust without even realizing it.
Hmm.
Because I started to understand that he's not trying to leave, he's not trying to hurt me, and it takes a lot to speak your feelings and be that vulnerable. Um and those conversations were hard, but trust was built, and it made me feel more secure to not avoid the issue, and like you said, have that fight and know we're going to work through it. Because to me, it wasn't like, okay, we're going to fight and that's it, he's leaving. To me, now I knew, like, no, couples fight, I'm secure in the fact that he loves me, I love him, but we need to work this out. We also are learning still to fight fair. I mean, sometimes we slip up, and like any couple, we can fight a little dirty, but we don't keep it going anymore like we used to for days. And we now know how to come to each other and say sorry. We know how to go, even if it takes a couple of hours or maybe even a day. One of us will always go to the other person and be like, yo, my bad. Like, I'm sorry. I got heated. I didn't mean to do that. That wasn't happening before. Before, it was just like every man for himself and just saying every horrible thing we could say. I'm glad that we've gotten to that point, because opening up and being vulnerable, right, babe, has allowed us to talk about other things um, in a more open light. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about our relationship, that after all the drama that we've been through, I know I can go to my husband and I can talk to my husband about anything. I've never been more myself with anyone in this planet than I have with my husband. I'm able to talk to him about anything, and that's very freeing for me. For somebody who's always had issues with self and self esteem and worrying about being my true self because people may not like me, the fact that I have a partner in life that I could just tell him anything, and believe me, I tell him everything. um, you still love me. And I'm glad that we went to counseling because we were
Didn't
able to
see
get
that.
to that point.
You say you still love me. I went.
Nah, you love me. So
Mhm.
I guess to wrap this up, then I guess my question to you is, what made you realize you were ready? What got you to the point to make the assumption on your own after we went through the counseling that you were ready?
I can't put a finger on it. It's just one day I just said, because remember we were going through the planning process,
Mhm.
and then it was like, let's, like, fuck all the bullshit. Why are we gonna take 6 months to try to figure this out and figure this out and figure this out? Let's get it's not about the, for me it's not about the show.
Mhm.
It's not about the how expensive it is and how fancy it is and all that. So I remember that conversation distinctly. It was like, yo, let's just go to fucking the mall. Let's get a couple of cheap ass rings. Let's get the pastor to do it, and then we'll upgrade the rings later on down the line. And literally that Saturday we did it.
Mhm.
I can't put a finger on what it was that,
You went to work and came out of work and met me at the church.
but I mean that's that literally. But I
Literally.
mean, what made me say, screw it, let's do it. I can't tell you what made me. I can't tell you here what made me change my mind, because it wasn't here that made me change my mind. It was here that made me change. That made me say, you know what, fuck it. Let's screw all the planning. Screw that. If we're gonna do it, let's just do it, and then we'll upgrade whatever we want to upgrade later on down the line. And then we just ended up.
We got married.
I mean, it's not. Sometimes you got to follow your heart. You know what I mean? And we. So no, what I was saying was that I couldn't, like, there's certain situations where yes, I think a little overthinking is warranted because you
Mhm.
got to protect certain things, but in that situation, when it comes to getting married, I think overthinking it just overcomplicates it. We want to get married. Who cares how we do it? Let's just fucking
Hmm.
do it. And that was my thought process going into it. It's like, fuck chairs, fuck how many people are going to be there. Who cares? Who cares about all of that? Because it's not about all of that. It's about us getting married. So let's just go do it. And that's what we
I
did.
agree. I agree. Up to that point, to me, I agree. We had done so much work. We were so proud of where we were and how we got there. That to me, and especially also, we had counseling, but we also it was faith based counseling. So we really not only got to just deal with issues, but we really got an understanding of what type of marriage we wanted to have.
Yeah. You got to give a big shout out to Pastor G.
Yes, we really got into the like really structured pretty much, and we're able to lay a foundation of what type of marriage, what type of roles, how we wanted to live our lives, understanding that we didn't have to ask permission to have the type of
Yeah.
marriage that we wanted. So it really actually in reality taught us a lot about marriage that we didn't even know. And could you say that's safe to say, baby, that you were married before? It was even just different. It was like it just it's different. I think.
I mean, it just for me, and I think this is one of the biggest ways that we see eye to eye. One of the biggest things that we see eye to eye. It, it's not about the show.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's not about the show. So we were overthinking the show, and the show isn't for us. The show is for everybody else. At least that's my thought process. You know,
Mhm.
some people want the big, beautiful wedding and all that. That's what they want. For me, it wasn't necessary. At the end of the day, we end up with the same end result. We're married. No matter how big, no matter how small, no matter how many people there, no matter whether we have steak or chicken, doesn't matter.
We
No,
had burgers,
none
by the
of,
way.
yeah, that's exactly what we did. And what we did, we went and dressed up to a diner and ate. Like to me, it's the intimacy of it,
Yes,
not the glamorousness of it. You know, and I don't know,
intimacy.
maybe I'm
That's a good
just
way of putting it. I think that's what it is. I think that with everything we've been through, all the work we've done, there's a lot of intimacy in this relationship. And not sex just sexual intimacy. We have a lot of emotional intimacy, and I think that's why we're able to be so connected, and we've gone through a lot in our relationship and as a family, especially the last couple of years. And I really owe the fact that we did the work, that it allowed us to be able to get through it, because
mhm.
we have been there for one another. And shit was rough, and it's still rough. But
It's rough.
again,
It's rough for different reasons now, though. It's not a struggle between me and you
mm-mm,
like it was in the beginning. More now, it's more of a struggle of it's different type of support that the other person needs because of some of the things that we've been through the
mm-hmm.
last year and a half. So it's just different.
But it's not us,
Yeah, it's not
and
us. Yeah,
it's not us. But we've learned a lot, and so it's not that. I mean, what we're dealing with is not easy, but because we're doing the work, we've done the work, and we're committed to to continuously working on our marriage. It was easy for us to step into the role and offer that emotional support, because a lot of it was emotional support and just being there for the person while all these things were going. And like I said, just connected. Like, I love my husband very much. I drive him absolutely crazy all day long, but
so
he
it's
is.
it's 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 11:48 at night, and we're making this video.
But he does it. Why? Because he loves me. I know that, and that's one thing I would say. He supports me in anything that it is that I want to do. He's my biggest fan, my biggest cheerleader. If he's not as loud as I am, but he's the reason I'm able to do this the way I am doing it. Because as soon as I said this is what I want to do, He did all the research. He got the equipment. He told me what it is that I need to look out for. Like, he always has my back. He always has our back. And I love you so much, baby. Always and forever. He loves when I get mushy. That's why I'm doing this right now. So,
No, we could.
any final thoughts, babe, when it comes to marriage or anything before we go? Anything that you want to let our viewers know?
Don't rush. Take your time. Everything happens the way it's supposed to happen for a reason. And I've learned that a lot over the last few years of my life. Like I said, when it comes to meeting you and having Haley and now the family that we have, even this little rascal that's walking around behind me who should be in his kennel sleeping.
Posty.
Um, but everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, the way it's meant to happen. And you got to look at it that way. You have to look at it that way. Our story played out the way it played out because that's the way it was supposed to play out. If it would have played out any other different way, then the circumstances right now might be totally different. You got to let your story play out, and ours played out the way it played out because that's the way it was meant to play out for us. You know, so we got married when we were meant to get married. We met when we were meant to meet. Haley was born when she was meant to be born. We got sushi when we were meant to get sushi. We got ghost when we were meant to get ghost. We got what's the fish's name? Vaporeon or whatever. Well, we got the
Vaporeon, whatever the heck
right,
Katie named the fish.
right. CJ comes and goes because that's what he's meant to do. It's just but I mean, it's shit happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're at a point in your life where that's something that you're contemplating with a particular individual, it'll play out the way it's supposed to play out because that's the way it's supposed to play out. That's the way I look at it now.
I agree. If anyone out there is listening and, like my husband said, is contemplating getting married, if it's meant to happen, it will. But if work needs to be done, make sure you guys are both on
Do the
board to
work.
do it.
Yeah, do the work.
You have to do work because it's not all telenovela stuff. Marriage is real. It can be a beautiful experience, but it's a lot of hard work and it can get real ugly. But it's worth it if you guys are both willing to love each other and support each other and really tackle the issues when they need to be tackled. And I think that's all I have to say when it comes to the subject. Everybody's story is different, but if you love each other, at the end of the day, that love should be enough to get you guys to do what it is that you need to do to be
Mm-hmm.
successful and
Yeah.
raise your family.
However that love story plays out for that particular couple, that's the way it was supposed to play out. If they get married
That
in a week, they get married in a week. Like my parents, if they don't get married for 13 years, they don't get married for 13 years. That's just the way the story is meant to play out. There's
that
no
is
such.
absolutely
It's just we 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 go by what what the romanticism of what we see
yeah, the
on
telenovela
television
syndrome.
and what we read in books and it's that's not reality. That's not reality. You don't move to the quaint town of 300 people and marry the guy that makes chocolate and grows flowers.
Oh, he's talking about
All
my
right.
Hallmark movies.
Yeah, we don't live in a Hallmark movie. All right. We don't live in a Hallmark movie. We don't marry the chef that you haven't seen in 20 years and you just happen to walk into his restaurant. But he was the love of your life in high school. Like that shit don't happen in real life.
Yo, you be watching a lot of my movies too on the low,
That shit don't happen in real life.
huh?
Um, but I mean, it's that's it. That's it. It's one thing I learned in this story that we're living is that shit it happens the way it's supposed to happen because that's the way it's supposed to happen.
Amen.
Mm-mm.
Well, thank you so much, babe, for coming on here and letting me ask you so many questions and
Yeah,
being.
I think about doing it again. Maybe.
I think it would be dope. I think that it's great to have a male perspective, and I love the fact that you're so open and so honest as well when it comes to sharing your feelings. A lot of the times, it's hard to get a man to be really not necessarily honest, but like well, no, honest with their feelings. Sometimes men like to kind of hide it a lot and give a lot of bravado. So I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable when sharing your experiences, not only with our relationship, but your past experience. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this special episode of Tuesday Talks with Jazz. It was such an amazing conversation with my hubby, my best friend, the love of my life. Make sure you guys check out all Mama's Cocktail Hour content on our YouTube channel. We are trying very hard to get our YouTube up and rolling. Make sure that you subscribe to our Mama's Cocktail Hour IG page and that you're following all the ladies of Mama's Cocktail Hour because we are some badass mamas. So, with that said, no, I will check you out on the next video. He possibly will check you out in the future.
But I will be watching the next video.
But he will be watching the next video as always. You guys are amazing, and I will see you soon. Bye.